Buckeye Talk coming to you before Ohio State football practice. It's Tuesday afternoon, and we just got done talking to Ryan Day and Matt Barnes, who's a secondary coach, and I guess you'd call him the interim defensive coordinator, or he doesn't have that title, but he's the one calling the defense on Saturdays right now. I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com with Doug Lesmerises and Stephen Means. And, Stephen, I just kind of wanted to get your major takeaways from this. Barnes came out today and was asked a lot of questions about how is this defensive staff sort of responding to the shakeup that happened in the middle of the year where play calling is taken away from Kerry Combs. He goes up to the booth. Matt Barnes comes down to the sideline, and now he's the guy doing that. And he spoke in a lot of very positive terms, obviously, today, trying to emphasize that this is a defense that is collaborative, and it comes by group consensus on how they approach things. But also, I thought made it clear that there are some changes that have happened, and maybe his perspective is changing how this defense gets called on Saturdays.
Very similar to what he went through in 2018, where randomly through the season he ended up calling plays, and he's kind of leaning on that experience.
At Maryland.
At Maryland. He's randomly had in the middle of the season, he ended up calling plays, and he's leaning on that experience a little bit. But also, there's some changes in personnel. Obviously, Josh Proctor has a little bit affected that and where they're putting guys now. But also, you're seeing a lot of these younger guys start to make plays. That's helping out with some of this play calling that he's able to do because they're getting a little bit more consistent with the players that they're putting on the field. But as far as him calling plays when he wasn't originally supposed to be calling plays, that's something he did at Maryland before, so he can lean on that experience.
That is an interesting contrast because for the first couple weeks of the season, we talked about how much is this personnel, how much is this scheme, how much is this coaching, and I don't think it's any question that the personnel seems more settled now than it did 2 weeks ago, even with like a major injury to Josh Proctor and some other guys have been missing. It feels like Ohio State is starting to get a better idea of who its best defensive players are. The question is, has that come about just organically, or did it come about because some of the coaching and schematic changes that they've made and have put them in a better situation these last 2 weeks?
Well, they don't have Josh Proctor, so that's a big loss. So, that's yes, it's settled, but they also subtracted one of the best dudes back there. I mean, the cornerback who was the most problematic cornerback against Oregon was Legend Cavazos, and he doesn't play anymore. And the cornerback against Minnesota, who probably was the most problematic in that game, was Ryan Watson. He doesn't play anymore. So some of the stuff, Cam Brown and Seven Banks getting healthy is obviously a big part of that. When we saw all the constant personnel changes, it's clear they were working it out. They didn't figure it out in August, so they had to keep figuring it out in September. And I do think the roles are pretty defined now in the back seven, and I think that's going to help them. But they've also, gone to a different look. They're playing more of a two-safety look now. Ronnie Hickman as the bullet is just playing, sort of strong safety, a second safety back. He can come up in the box, but he's versatile enough. He's been a really key guy for the defense. But Matt Barnes is certainly doing that. It is schematic that, Tulsa and Akron are going four wide and chucking the ball all over the place, so they don't have to have another guy in the box. They drop a second safety back. So, I'll be curious to see how they do it against Rutgers, maybe in a game that doesn't get out of hand immediately. Maybe I don't think Rutgers is going to chuck it around as much as Tulsa and Akron wound up doing that. But, Matt Barnes is in a tough spot, man. It's like he got promoted at someone else's expense, and he said one of my strengths, which I just absolutely cannot relate to, is that I'm kind of a low ego guy. And I was like, wonder what that's like. So he's just kind of doing his thing, and then to have to stand there and be like, hey, cool for you, bad for them. Of course he's going to fall back on it's a collaborative thing, but he's calling the plays.
Yeah. He did make an emphasis when he was asked about the schematic changes and playing more two safety looks, at least pre-snap and changing things up there, about the importance of disguising things and deception and how you're competing with the opposing offensive coordinator as much as trying to fool things for the quarterback. Did that hit your ears as this was a change that we felt needed to happen and wasn't happening earlier?
No, that was what the guy, a static defense. That's what they were really doing a lot early. They weren't doing a lot of post-snap adjustments, and you can see safeties rotating now on a regular basis right at the snap and just giving a different look. So it clearly wasn't a priority with Kerry Combs calling the defenses, and as you said, Matt Barnes said it is a priority, and you can see it, and disguise is important because at some point, especially right now, they don't just have enough great defensive players just be like, here's what we're doing, come attack us, which has worked a lot in the past at Ohio State. That's not where they are from a talent perspective right now, and Matt Barnes is acknowledging that.
Is it easier to do that when you know who you're putting on the field and guys know what their roles are? Because when you think about it, I mean, Lathan Ransom was playing cover safety, now he's playing free safety. Ryan Watts was starting at corner against Minnesota, and now, like, whatever he's doing at free safety, he's not playing. They were rotating a bunch of guys in that linebacker. Guys didn't really have consistent roles every single week. Now the guys know this is what I'm doing every single week. It's maybe a little easier to get a little bit more complex with the defensive schemes because guys know what they're doing, especially when you're dealing with young guys.
I think, like, in terms of what you ask individual guys do on a play, I think that's true. But, like, they were just standing a safety deep in the middle of the field. Like, they could have told whoever's doing it, if you're going to play, you go where they tell you to go. Now, maybe they're not saying, okay, at the snap, rotate, and you cover here, and you drop back, and we're going to zone blitz and drop in coverage. Maybe the assignments are more basic, but they've made a fundamental philosophical shift of we're going to do something other than just stand a single deep safety back here and say attack our secondary. So I think that's not personnel related to me. That is disguise. But then I do think they can probably ask some guys to do a little bit more play to play because they're settling in at who's going to be on the field.
And there is a difference between what you're lined up in before the snap and what your players actually do once the ball is snapped, and that's kind of the whole point of the disguise. I think it is true, though, as much as what you're saying is true. When we asked players, even after the Oregon game, like what went wrong today, there was a lot of guys weren't doing their job. A scheme was put out there, and then guys didn't follow that. It wasn't like we weren't schematically ready. I think there was a combination of both those things, and I think they are both starting to get smoothed out. However, I think Akron doesn't tell us a lot. I think Rutgers will tell us more. I think Maryland will tell us even more. That's a team that comes back here at Ohio State in a week from Saturday. But until then, get the text, 614-350-3315. We'll have daily intel, pregame, postgame, everything from Ohio State. And listen to Buckeye Talk 5 days a week.